Hey everybody, so we're going to pick up after this first video. This is the second video of a two, maybe three-part video um, series. Um, we are talking about the entity framework, and the first video we did CRUD operations. And so in the second video, we're going to continue where we left off. Um, Specifically, we're going to use a drop-down list to filter our data. So we're not going to just be displaying all the records. We're just going to display some of the records based on, excuse me, based on a drop-down list that can filter the data. We're also going to use sorting and paging. And in this video, we will do a little bit of data validation. In other words, we'll do some validation controls using entity framework. Okay, so a lot going on. I'll just start this website from scratch again, you know. So I'm just going to call this entity framework 2 because it's the second one. Empty website. Again, I'm working with a Halloween database. Okay, now that this has been created, right away I'm just going to go ahead and add a new item and an entity data model. We call this one Halloween.
Got a dot. Yeah, you got a dot on the end of it.
The dot's been okay. I've kept the dot there so far and not had any issues.
Oh, okay.
At least when creating it in this fashion.
Right.
Yes, I'm going to add it to the app code folder. And we're doing a designer from database. Later on, we'll maybe if we do a third video, we'll do a code from database and see how that's kind of different. And I got to connect into my Halloween database again. This is just my version of SQL Server that I have running on this computer. Connecting into the Halloween database. I'm going to change this to say Halloween entities, entity framework 6. Include the categories and the products table. Literally, this is everything I've done so far has been the same from the last video. So again, we are filtering data with a drop-down list. We're sorting, we're paging, and validating our data. Those are the tasks for today's video. So as you see, it created our diagram, which we can change, but it's pretty much fine as is. If I would make changes to that diagram, it would make changes to the code. But here's the code that's been created as far as a category class, product class, all the properties, and a context class called Halloween entities that inherits from DB context. This is used to basically connect into our database. So we'll be instantiating a class of Halloween entities as we go through. This is where we needed to start from. Go ahead and add in a web form. And the first thing we need is a drop-down list. And so I'll drag in my drop-down list from the standard And we can mess with the properties here. The item type will be category. I'm going to give this an actual ID, DDL category. Because I think that's a good practice. Anytime you add a control to a form, make sure you give it a good name. The select method, now with this drop-down list, normally we got IntelliSense here to help us. And with the drop-down list, that's not the case. We have not, even though we've given our drop-down list a type of category, the IntelliSense doesn't pop up here. And when I practiced this the other day, it didn't pop up here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the name of my method that I plan on writing. I'm also going to set it up to do a post back when you change it. So the auto post back is true. And then our primary key is our actually, let's do this. The data, and I could do this in the GUI here. We don't need the primary key. The value field, this is the field for the numerical value. This is our primary key. So this will be our category ID. And the data text field, this is the field that's displayed, will be long name. And let's go into our code behind here. And let's write a public iQueryable category. This is the method that our select statement is going to use, and it's a pretty simple link statement. Let me go ahead and say using system model system web model binding. I can go ahead and instantiate our Halloween entities here. Therefore, we can use it in here. This is just a simple return link statement from CNDB categories. Order by the long name, select C. And pretty straightforward for the drop-down list. Let's go ahead and view it in the browser. Try to do that kind of quick, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a mistake. But everything so far looks so good. Just that it doesn't run all that fast, but we'll test that a little bit later. Now we get to add in our grid view. And let's see, that's under data, grid view. Again, we're working in source code for the most part here. This item type is going to be product, and its select method, it does give us the IntelliSense to generate that. Going back here, I'll read the comment here. The return type can be changed to IEnumerable. However, to support paging and sorting, if you change the return type, you have to have these. So I'm going to keep it iQueryable. That makes it a lot easier to support paging and sorting. So that's a really nice comment there to remind you. if you don't have your textbook, that's pretty nice. Let's go ahead and write this method here. Now the first thing about iQueryable product, grid view 1, get data, is it has to accept a parameter. And that parameter is a control. And we give it a name of DDL category. Now DDL category is the name of the control that's going to be passing in the string. So that naming convention does make a difference. And we could just do some basic, hey, if the category is null, let's do one query. Let's do, we can assign it to something else here. So assign it to a link statement. Order by c.longName. Select C. First or default. And the way this works is basically, hey, when the page loads, there's a pretty good chance that there hasn't been a selection in the drop-down list. You know, the user hasn't selected anything in the drop-down list. Therefore, since nothing's been selected, nothing's been passed to the grid view. And if nothing's been passed to this grid view, this DDL category will be null. So what this does is it says, hey, if that category is null, go ahead and select the first category ID and assign that to our string, because that's what we're going to wind up returning. Okay, otherwise, you know, this will get the products for the selected category. Let me go ahead and add in a comment here. This will get the first category ID from the database. And here's our link statement from P in the products table, where the category ID equals the DDL category, which is our parameter, ordered by p.lastName. It's not last name, it's just p.name. Select P. And this is our select statement for the grid view. Now if I load this up in the browser, there it is. Okay, so we're basically selecting star at this point, which we don't need every column. We can narrow it down by using bound fields in our control and setting the auto generate columns to false. But just to demonstrate that it works, there we go. So let's change our grid view control. And let's change the column, so we're not displaying all the columns, we're just displaying the columns we want. And so I'm going to display the few columns here. Including the ID. sorry there for the pause, the unit price. And I'll format that as currency. And the on hand. And then again, what we need to do is we need to turn the auto generate columns to false. If I can find it here. There it goes. Okay. Wait for it, there it goes. The next thing was to allow for sorting and for paging, and luckily it's pretty simple. We could change some properties here to allow sorting to true, and then we have to say on what columns do we sort and what's the sort expression. We also need to allow paging, which is here. Allow paging to true. I go to the source here. If we want to do sorting on the bound field, unit price, sort expression equals unit price, and on hand sort expression on hand. And now you can see that sorting and paging worked. Now the one thing I didn't do is I didn't set the page size. So let me set the page size here real quick so you can see the paging. So there's sorting. Sorting is working. Let me set the page size. From 10 down to 4. There we go. Now the next step is data validation. To worry about and to work with data validation though, we need some other operations. You know, you need like an edit, for example. So you can edit the on hand. And so I'm going to go ahead and put in the edit functionality into this control. On my grid view, I'll say update method equals create a new method. Okay, now the update item, remember the ID parameter should match the data key names set on the control. So I did not set the data key names. That's a good reminder for me to set the data key names. on my grid view product ID.
What was it you said?
I added the data key names to product ID. Product ID. Now I'm going to go in and look at the data type on my product ID. I'd like to see here under product ID is a string. Okay, so you might, that's just the default, the way that the model diagram, the diagram model made the data type. You could change that, but right now it is a string, so I'm going to keep it as a string. So I'm also going to change the data type here to be a string. String product ID. And I'll go ahead and make this a var instead of product. I'm going to say from P in DB products, where P dot product ID double equals product ID, select P, dot first or default, if the item is empty, try to update the item. If it is valid, let's save the changes with our save changes method, and update our grid view with a data bind. Okay, on our grid view then, let's go ahead and add a command field to edit. Okay, and so our edit command is now working. That was all from the CRUD video yesterday and your textbook. Now what I want to do is I want to add invalidation so that this is, maybe it's a required field, or maybe there's a range of acceptable values. Okay, and the way that is done is with something called data annotations. Data annotations are created inside of the class. And so if we look at the product, we could go down to the on hand, and we could just add in a required. Now this annotation isn't found. That's because if I do control dot, we need to have a using statement. So now on hand becomes a required field. So that's how we work with data validation. And there are a bunch of annotations. Your book has them on page 691. Those are just some of the annotations, and there are more. Okay? This is how you do data validation. Now, just to demonstrate what it looks like, the way that you do this is you add in a validation summary control. And let me look at the properties here. I'm looking for a show model state. Show model state errors to true. Now last time when I did this, that's all I had to do was add this validation summary control and add in the data annotation. And then believe it or not, it actually worked. Now, let's give it a shot here. Let's leave this empty. So nothing in there. Update. There it goes. On-hand field is required. I'll do another data annotation. And I'll set the range of acceptable values. You can see here the minimum, the maximum, and then an error message. So I'll say between 1 on the low end and 500 on the high. Okay, so that's another data annotation. And if I didn't mean to close that, let's try this again. Excuse me. View it in browser. I'm trying to make this video quick. It's been 27 minutes, so far, so good. Okay, it is required still. If I give it a good value, it accepts it. If I give it a bad value, value must be between 1 and 500. Let's say I put in some letters. It even does not accept the letters. So again, pretty neat, those data annotations. So I did cover all the things that I wanted to cover, but things are going so smooth. I have to break something. So I'm going to try something a little risky here because I haven't previewed this beforehand. I haven't tested this code out, so it might break. Okay, but what we learned in chapter 17 was how to separate out the layers, right? So we learned the presentation layer, the data layer, and the middle layer, okay? And what we've reverted back to is a two-tier system, right? We've reverted to basically an ASPX page with the code behind, and then if you look at this code behind, this is where our data access code is written, right? We're accessing the code from this code behind, making it a two-tier system instead of a three-tier system. We lose the middle layer, right? We lost that C# file that you could put on the application layer or the middle layer to handle your data access code. And so I'm going to create one of those data access classes that we created in chapter 17. I'm going to take out the code of here, take it out of here we'll just try maybe our update first and put it into that data access class. Okay, so that's going to be kind of the extra thing that we're going to add in here. Okay, so I'm going to start off by going into my grid view. and I'm going to specify on the grid view on calling data methods. And if you look at this, this is basically saying, hey, these are where we're going to get the methods from, not the code behind, but we're going to get this methods from. Matter of fact, it's going to help me generate the method. If I actually go into this method, this is where we're going to specify our data access class. And in our data access class, we'll write the methods that get the data and update the data. Now the syntax for this is a little bit weird. You realize we have a parameter called E. That's data type is a calling data methods event args. Okay, so let's look at the syntax for this. The data methods object, and we have to create this object. So in my app code, I'm going to add in a new class. I'm going to call this product DB. Now this is very similar to what we did in chapter 17. In product DB, I'm going to take the update item and the get data, not for our drop-down list, just for the grid view at first. I'll put those two methods inside of the product DB class. Add in a couple using statements. Let's go ahead and create a Halloween entities. We need to change now. We need to change a few things. We're going to pass in another parameter here. Now in this, instead of model state, this is CTX. Dot model state not found. We do a return. Now we do a CTX. everything's working through this point minus my grid view. It's not recognizing my grid view inside a different folder. App code is here. So for now, just temporarily, I'm going to comment this out. So my grid view might not refresh the change right away. Okay, that was expected. Let me pause the video here and see if I can troubleshoot this error real quick. I did. I left this statement unfinished. So let me finish this statement. So new product DB. Okay, let's give this another shot. Fully expecting an error. Be happy if it works. Just set your expectations low. There we go. So the select works. And let's try the edit. This is pretty cool. And the edit works. So now we've taken it from that two-tier system back into the three-tier system that we learned was valuable back in chapter 17 by having the data access code in its own class, using the only method in here is to instantiate an instance of that class, the data access class, and then calling those methods appropriately from there. So that's pretty cool stuff. That's a good stopping point for this video. So thanks for following along.